my colleague to begin the recording. Thank you very much. And as a final piece of housekeeping, I'll ask also my colleague Irena to post a link to today's agenda so that you're able to see the details of who will be taking part, who's on the different panels. Please feel free to open the agenda link that we'll post in just a second. And now I give the floor to IPU Secretary General, Mr. Martin Chungong, who will give opening remarks to today's webinar. Martin, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Very good to see all of you. And it gives me great pleasure to be with you today to present this new tool, the indicators for democratic parliaments, which have been designed by the IPU and partner organizations, and which are available in English and Spanish at the website www.parliamentaryindicators.org. The publication of the indicators for democratic parliaments represents a significant milestone for the parliamentary community. The indicators are a multi-party or partner initiative convened by the IPU. They have been prepared over a period of 4 years with input from people in more than 50 countries in parliaments around the world. We have worked hand in hand, but with our partners at CPA, UNDP, UN Women, Directorio, Legislativo, Inter-Parliamentary, NDI, and the Westminster Foundation for Democracy to develop this indicator. The core purpose of the indicators is to support parliamentary learning and development. They offer a framework for assessing parliamentary capacity and practice. The central philosophy of the indicators is self-assessment. We are not in the business of external judgments about the quality of this or that parliament. We provide you with the tools so that you can assess your own parliaments to identify the strengths and weaknesses and to generate ideas for where you want to further develop your parliament. Let me say a few words about why we have created these indicators. Parliaments are the central institution of a democracy. They have a unique mandate to represent the people, to pass laws, to adopt the budget, and to hold the government to account. The decisions taken by Parliament shape the future of society and of our planet. The way in which parliaments carry out their functions is therefore of the utmost importance. As public expectations evolve, parliaments are challenged to be ever more effective, accountable, and transparent. People want and need decision-making processes to be inclusive, responsive, participatory, and representative. These are the conditions for governance in the interests of the many, not the few. Parliaments that embody these democratic principles are set out in the internationally agreed Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, will be better equipped to take decisive action to fight poverty, to reduce inequalities, to ensure gender equality, to preserve the health of the planet, and indeed to effect positive change in all areas of human endeavor. So if we agree that being effective, being transparent, and so on is important for institutions, including parliaments, then the question is, how effective is my parliament? How transparent is my parliament? This set of indicators provides the answers or the questions to ask. It sets out all of the different dimensions of effectiveness and the criteria that you would look to fulfill. By measuring current capacity and practice, Parliament is able to formulate plans for future institutional development and track progress towards its goals. The publication of the indicators is an important step, certainly, but it is only a first step. The important thing is what you, parliaments, do with them. It is, as they say, in your hands. For parliaments that want to be stronger, for parliaments that have set ambitious objectives to be more transparent or more participatory, or simply to continue to improve, the indicators are a tool that can help you to achieve these objectives or goals. We at the Inter-Parliamentary Union and all the partner organizations that I salute today are ready to support you in your efforts to develop strong democratic parliaments. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for these opening words. I would like to build on this by presenting the key points from the indicators for democratic parliaments. I'm going to share my screen with you. So, first point to note, as Martin said, is that this is generally a multi-partner initiative on behalf of a number of organizations with significant experience working with parliaments on behalf of the whole parliamentary community. The partners have worked together over a number of years now, building on the previous experiences with benchmarks and self-assessment tools to develop these indicators, and more than 50 parliaments have participated, and overall hundreds of people around the world. I express my gratitude for everyone who's contributed to this effort. In essence, what are the indicators for democratic parliaments? As the Secretary General observed, every parliament has unique characteristics, its own history and context, but every parliament also has similar functions: lawmaking, oversight, representation, etc. And so the way in which parliaments carry out these functions is of capital importance. The indicators provide a self-assessment tool which helps them to address and answer these questions. The purpose of the indicators is to support Parliament's own learning and development, to provide them with a framework to help parliaments to identify their strengths and weaknesses, and through this process of examination, to generate recommendations for change and improvement. This is why the indicators exist. This is their raison d'être. The main channel through which any user can access the indicators is through a website, parliamentaryindicators.org. There's a QR code that you can scan. My colleague Irene has posted a link. I encourage you to take this opportunity to browse around the website and even follow along as I'm presenting. We'll come back to this website later in the presentation. So, how are the indicators organized? There are three levels. We have a heptagon image that you'll see throughout this presentation. The top level is around the targets, which will be familiar to you from the Sustainable Development Goals, the 7 adjectives which appear in the targets for SDG 16.6, 16.7. These keywords of effective, accountable, transparent, etc., which we understand as being universal aspirations agreed to by all countries as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Then the question really becomes, how do these adjectives apply to Parliament? How do these targets apply to Parliament? And how, for a Parliament, how can a Parliament assess, judge how effective it is, how participatory it is? And the indicators try to provide a framework for asking and answering these questions. If we funnel down, there are inside each target, there are a number of indicators. There are 25 indicators in all, and these indicators cover all areas of parliamentary activity. What you see on the screen are the 11 indicators which come within the target of effective parliaments. So think of this as a nest. Inside targets, there are indicators. Inside indicators, there are dimensions. So an indicator can have 2, 3, 4 dimensions, and this covers all of the different aspects. So if we're looking here in the example at the indicator 1.1 on parliamentary autonomy, well, one of the dimensions is institutional autonomy. Another dimension will be procedural autonomy, and so on. It's at this level that you will find what we've termed aspiring goals. And this is where we match the SDG targets, the aspirations, with the parliamentary practice, what actually happens inside Parliament. And we try to define an aspiring goal for each dimension of parliamentary activity. In a way, the goal to which we understand parliaments are working towards. And then inside each dimension, the bottom level is the assessment criteria. And it's at this level at which the users of the indicators will make a judgment and assessment on how well the Parliament is performing. This assessment process has a number of dimensions. I think we'll explore them in the course of today's session. Key point to note is that the assessment is intended to be a collective process. It's not me sitting alone in my room judging, okay, well, I think it's this. No, it's a collective process through which there's an exchange of viewpoints in order to reach a judgment, a common judgment. It's an assessment process that's based on evidence. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And through the process of looking at the evidence, reaching a judgment, the participants in the assessment exercise will naturally come to a determination on the strengths and the weaknesses of their Parliament, and through that, the recommendations for change. So to highlight and to really insist on some of the key concepts, self-assessment is the starting point. Where a Parliament is involved in assessment, the Parliament is in the driving seat. And this will involve, for example, setting the objectives for the assessment exercise. Why is this taking place? What are the objectives that you're seeking to achieve? Selecting which indicators you wish to look at, identifying who will participate in the different stages, and thinking ahead to the outcomes from the assessment process. What I want to insist on with the notion of self-assessment is that this is not an external judgment from ourselves, from the IPU or some other person. It is a process owned and driven by the people carrying out the assessment themselves. The second is the notion of selecting indicators. There are 25 indicators. It's a large body of work. The the assumption is that there is no obligation that an assessment should cover all 25 indicators. That is an option, but it's also possible to select one or two or more indicators, depending on what your entry point is. That if you're working on issues of accountability or looking at the lawmaking process or thinking about ways to increase women's political participation, there may be different selections, and we at the IPU and partners can advise on this. And then thinking more about the assessment process itself, I want to insist that the indicators and the assessment is really looking both at capacity and at practice. It's examining the rules that are in place, but also how those rules are used. We know from listening to so many parliaments through the preparation of this that having rules is extremely important, but it's not in itself sufficient. Those rules need to be applied in a non-partial, impartisan manner. And so the indicators are really inviting you to look at the different aspects, the capacity and the practice. The point of evidence is really important. We're trying to move away from arbitrary judgment, and the idea of evidence gives grounds for making a judgment, but also a ground for tracking progress so that you can see what has changed as time moves forward. It's also at this point where we imagine different roles for the parliamentary administration in supporting the assessment process, gathering the evidence, marshalling the facts as they are, and also a political role in making judgments, making determinations. And so for each parliament, for each assessment process, the roles between staff and parliamentarians will vary, will be balanced according to the objectives. And finally, to insist on the notion of recommendations for change. The process of assessment gathers its value in what happens next, what happens as a result of the assessment that you carry out, what you learn, and then what you decide to implement in practice afterwards. So I'll finish the presentation with reference to a couple of use cases. We're going to hear in the course of this seminar about the work the Senate of Pakistan did on all 25 indicators, trying to think how can we take a step back and look at our institution. And having done that, their conclusion was it's like doing a SWOT analysis of our own parliament. A different use case comes from the Parliament of Albania, where the parliament set for itself some institutional objectives to improve transparency and participation, and then use the indicators to help define the targets and the work plan that they would adopt to move towards these objectives. And thirdly, a use case from Inter-Parliamentary, which supports peer-to-peer capacity building projects between European parliaments and partner parliaments, and use the indicators as part of their needs assessment to try to identify with the parliament where to focus the activities, and then to monitor progress. So, brief overview of the indicators itself. I'll show you for a couple of seconds the website. Firstly, to note, it's available in English, French, and Spanish. That you can select the language up here at the top of the screen. To note that there's an extensive about section describing the assessment process, also linking to the assessment guidance, the guidelines and checklists that are published to support assessment processes. The indicators themselves, I'll click through here to just show that the 25 indicators from which you can drill down to the dimensions. You can download worksheets to fill out, and then case studies, 3 that I mentioned, and we hope to build this with your own experiences to move forward. A resource library of the different documents that we have used in researching and drafting these indicators. They're available for you to consult as well. And lastly, contact that we IPU, but also partners, are very keen to hear from you, very willing to support you in your processes as you work with these indicators. Please don't hesitate to contact us. So I close the presentation. Thank you for your attention. And I'd like to now move to the first roundtable in today's session, which my IPU colleague, Irena Mijanovic, who's played such a key role in steering indicators to this point today, will facilitate. So thank you. And Irena, over to you. And maybe Irena, you're on mute. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So in the next 40 minutes or so, we will have the opportunity to hear views and impressions and thoughts from 12 speakers from the parliamentary community who will speak about the indicators from different angles. We believe that this will help our audience. I see around 100 participants from parliaments and other stakeholders as well here. Will help them to get a clearer insight into the indicators, how they work, how to use them, and what are the benefits. And first, we are going to take a deep dive into indicators with the members of the project team, which was established at the very beginning of the indicators development process, and since then met regularly, provided guidance, and was actively involved in all stages in drafting, reviewing, and testing, and in this launch event, of course. It is my pleasure today to welcome team members, representatives of partner organizations, Westminster Foundation for Democracy, National Democratic Institute, Inter-Parliamentary International IDEA, United Nations Development Program, UNDP, CPA, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and Directorio Legislativo Foundation. I would say that another UN agency, UN Women, is also the partner on this project, but because of the time zone difference, they will be with us only tomorrow. Why to use the indicators? Of course, the primary purpose of the indicators is to support Parliament's ability to learn and improve. The ultimate objective is to strengthen Parliaments and, as our first speaker today always emphasizes, to enhance democracy. Anthony Smith, Chief Executive, Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Anthony, how do you see the importance of the indicators and their desired impact on the democracy?
Thank you very much, Irena. And I want to start by paying tribute to you and to Andy and the whole team for all of the work that has gone on guiding this project team over the years. So the Secretary General and Andy have told us about the mechanics of the indicators. I want to talk about the motivation behind them. And for me, this has been a work that has been a labor of love. In fact, for me, it's been a labor of 2 loves, my love for the Sustainable Development Goals and my love for parliaments. So let me explain what I mean. First, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, are a very precious roadmap towards a world in which all people are able to live the lives they want and they deserve. And the goals are commitments all of our countries made, and they're addressed to each of us in every community. And the work to adopt them, we know, was immense. I recall it very well. But the work to live up to them is even harder because it needs everyone everywhere to be involved. And parliaments have to be at the center of that work. Parliaments know that they are irreplaceable, that they have tremendous responsibility to help deliver political systems that meet the needs of their country. So parliaments also know how important the SDGs are, and they've done so much to be part of the story of the SDGs through the negotiations and now through the implementation. And we've seen through my organization's partners how many parliaments focus on the SDGs and scrutinize the work of governments, and that is essential work. But these indicators try to help parliaments to do something different, and that's why I think they're important. They're not about holding the executive to account for their SDG commitments, or not only about that, but instead they try to help parliaments understand whether they themselves are doing as much as they can and should to live up to the SDG commitments. What contribution are they making directly to the SDGs? Are our parliaments as effective as they could be, as it says in Goal 16, or as transparent and accountable as they need to be, or as inclusive and participatory as they must be? So we know that no parliament is perfect or could ever be perfect, but every parliament can continue to improve, because that's what our citizens deserve and need to meet the huge challenges that we all face. These indicators, therefore, are important because the SDGs are important and because parliaments are important. And we can't achieve the SDGs without all of our parliaments learning and evolving. And I hope these indicators will help them to do just that. Thank you very much, Irena, and all who are joining us today.
Thank you, Anthony, for these inspiring thoughts. And we will talk now briefly about the indicators development journey, which started in 2019. It was often challenging and demanding, but I can say that it was always all the time interesting. And it certainly required a lot of organization and coordination of the work process with a lot of people involved. Our next speaker, Victoria Hassan, will share some highlights about different stages and principles that guided us on that journey. Victoria will speak on behalf of the National Democratic Institute. She has been a member of the project team as a global expert on democratic practice and parliamentary procedure. And more recently, he has been standing in for NDI's Senior Program Director, Frida Arenas, a project member who is on maternity leave, and I use this opportunity to thank her as well for her contribution to the project. Let's watch Victoria's video recording.
In terms of the development and review of the indicators that we are launching today, there were 4 stages to the process: drafting, pilot testing, working towards the launch of the preliminary indicators, and then working towards today's launch of the final version. Our drafting process included us as a project team agreeing on an indicator template and the development of live trackers that allowed us to access our drafts in their various versions online and gave us the ability to follow each other's drafting progress and virtually discuss where we were at. Next, we conducted pilot tests with parliaments from different regions and political structures. We did this by working with our various teams, for example, our NDI country teams, to guide members and staff through focus groups and other collective meetings to provide feedback. When we reached the stage of having built a set of preliminary indicators years into the project, we began working on a preliminary launch to celebrate the milestone and profile our efforts. We launched these preliminary indicators in June 2022, and shortly after agreed as a project team that there should be a globally accessible website for these indicators. To assist in this, Frida at NDI developed a website that helps showcase these indicators in a user-friendly platform. The project team then continued to engage with global parliaments to solicit feedback on the indicators until we felt ready to work towards today's launch of the final indicators and website portal. In terms of the development and review of the indicators that we are launching today, there were 4 stages to the process: drafting, pilot testing, working towards the launch of the preliminary indicators, and then working towards today's launch of the final version. Our drafting process. A critical thread that made this process possible was team collaboration. There has been a strong collaborative spirit between the partners throughout this project. We all brought different global perspectives based on our own unique experience and expertise. We held frequent check-ins as a core drafting group that helped ensure internal accountability. Based on NDI's experience, other key insights useful to anyone looking to co-create a tool of this kind on a global scale includes the advice to develop an online tracking and collaboration portal that is accessible to all project team members. Engage a diversity of perspectives and expertise when creating your core project team. This really helps to ensure a holistic and global product is created at the end. Set firm deadlines and meet periodically as a team. Create a clear guiding methodology for any pilot testing so that data is cross-comparative and rollout is the same across any region. Finally, be willing to accept feedback on all levels.
And we are continuing with the round table. Our next speaker is Jonathan Murphy, who is head of program Inter-Parliamentary International IDEA, which provides support to many parliaments. Jonathan, could you explain the benefits of using the indicators in supporting partner parliaments?
Thank you very much indeed, Irena. And let me start by, as Anthony did, thanking the IPU for launching and leading the initiative. Their open and generous engagement with diverse partners, I think, has been key in the success of what I consider an extremely valuable tool for parliaments, but also for parliamentary strengthening. As the European Union's global program for parliamentary strengthening, Inter-Pares is keenly interested in understanding how parliaments are performing and working with our partners who are parliaments in emerging democracies and national parliaments of the European Union working together peer to peer. So understanding baseline performance of parliaments, helping parliaments, emerging democracy parliaments, to identify the ways in which they would like to strengthen themselves is key to our programming. We had developed our own baseline assessment methodology prior to the development of these indicators, but we have found since the indicators, or in the process of the indicators being developed, and now the indicators have been finalized, that they have definitely helped us in deepening our understanding of parliamentary support. So we have used them to enrich our own monitoring and evaluation indicators. And particularly, I would say, to give an example, in the area of parliamentary administration, where the previous monitoring and evaluation indicators sort of measure parliamentary administration performance and objectives, has been very, very much strengthened by making use of the IPU-led indicators. I underline, of course, as our colleagues, as Andy, as Martin, and our colleagues have stated, that the indicators are primarily designed as a self-assessment tool for parliaments. But I also want to underline that these are very much open source indicators, that they are indicators that can be used by anybody who is interested in understanding parliamentary performance, who is interested in identifying what are the key areas of Parliament's work that we would like to work on, that we would like to strengthen, that parliaments would like to strengthen. That this is an incredibly rich database. An incredibly rich database of tools, of indicators that can be used. So I would encourage people to make use, to really explore the website, to explore the indicators, because I think just in doing that, anybody involved in parliaments, with parliaments, and in parliamentary strengthening will find lots of interesting underpinning ways of thinking about how parliaments can enhance their performance. And of course, the purpose of parliaments enhancing their performance is to strengthen democracy. There is a case study which goes into more detail of how Inter-Pares has made use of these indicators, and I encourage all of you to go to the website and read that. There's a short version which is also linked to a longer paper. And finally, yes, to congratulate all of the parliaments that have been involved in developing this, these tools, to congratulate my colleagues at different parliamentary strengthening organizations, and most of all to thank IPU for their brilliant work in leading this very, very complex initiative. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for these recommendations for parliaments. I have just posted the link to the Inter-Pares case study on the indicators website in the chat for those who want to learn more about using the indicators in the context of parliamentary development project. Today, we want to introduce what are indicators and why to use them, but also to help participants from parliaments and other stakeholders as well, who would probably like to know where to start, how partner organizations can assist them. A question for the Inaginitsi, Regional Governance Advisor at UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, is how can UNDP support parliaments in assessing their work against the indicators, particularly through its regional and country offices?
Thank you, Irena. Indeed, as colleagues have highlighted, these indicators are powerful tools for parliaments to internalize and self-reflect, to realize where they currently stand in terms of their capacity, capabilities, and performance, vis-a-vis where they could be according to certain benchmarks that reflect recognized good practice. But at the same time, they are a powerful tool to help parliaments determine their North Star and priorities for development, and to measure progress towards their strategic objectives or aspiring goals. At UNDP, we are committed to promote the new indicators through our country, regional, and global programs, and to support parliaments in using them, starting with facilitation of self-assessment exercises in individual parliaments, followed by experience sharing at sub-regional or regional levels. And this is and will be done first and foremost in countries where UNDP already has ongoing or planned parliamentary strengthening projects or integrated governance portfolios that do include parliamentary components. But also in countries where parliaments are interested in working with UNDP to develop new such projects or interventions, we will make sure to integrate those indicators that are the most relevant to the intended scope of the projects. I believe UNDP is well positioned to do this since we are working in 170 countries, and our mandate includes building democratic governance, rule of law, and inclusive institutions. And therefore, we systematically engage parliaments and do enjoy trusted relations with them in all regions, supporting many legislatures to become more inclusive, more representative, transparent, participatory, and responsive, more effective in delivering their roles and functions, but also more agile and future-facing institutions. So I truly encourage our parliamentary counterparts in any of our program countries to approach UNDP if they are interested to explore using the indicators. And we will also proactively reach out to parliaments through our country offices primarily. I believe that while parliaments are called today to act on behalf of both current and future generations, and to be truly up to epochal tasks, the new indicators for democratic parliaments can also be seen as a timely call to not lose sight of the original core values and principles of democracy and parliamentarism. So they should be truly welcome and made good use of us all. And I would like to close by thanking IPU for leading this initiative and including us, and of course, thank all our partners for a great endeavor in bringing this wonderful initiative to fruition. Thank you very much. Over to you, Irene.
Thank you, Doina, and thank you for this information and for encouraging parliaments to contact UNDP offices in their countries. Indicators for democratic parliaments are a self-assessment tool. We repeated it continually, and as Andy said, self-assessment is a starting point. And the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is one of the partners in this project that has a significant experience with supporting parliaments in self-assessing their work. I will ask Lydia Buchanan, Deputy Head of Programs Bilateral Engagement at CPA, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, about the advantages of self-assessment approach to parliamentary development.
Great. Hi, thank you. So as you've mentioned, the CPA, we have a number of years of experience of undertaking self-assessment and assisted assessment benchmarks assessments. And the main thing that we found, and it has been said throughout this launch event, is that self-assessment is so vital. It creates an atmosphere where everybody's invested, everybody is taken on board with the process of the assessment. And Andy mentioned it earlier, and I wrote it down, it's a collective process. And although the term self-assessment often seems like an isolated area, it's actually a collective process within your parliament. So when you're undertaking these kinds of assessments and you're looking at all the IPU indicators, ensure you're involving your presiding officers, your parliamentary staff, members, senators. Every key stakeholder within the parliament should be looking together at this assessment criteria. And the question is asked, why is self-assessment so important? It's so key for any element of effective change. You cannot have success unless everybody is on board and going along with the journey. And that is the key for this. It's very good to assess yourself and to see where you stand as a parliament and why it's important to note what level you're currently at. But the reason for doing a self-assessment is so that you can identify areas for change. And unless you can identify those areas for change and have everybody on board, there's no point in undertaking the assessment. So self-assessment is key for ensuring that you can create effective change in your parliament. There are also other benefits, so you won't really face the external judgment that sometimes can put people off. Having an internal group, it may be a committee, an ad hoc set of partners that come together and assess you. It's key to ensuring that you know your parliament best and you know where those changes can be effective. As we said, although it's self-assessment, it's such a collective process, you need to engage with everybody in Parliament. And we would recommend not only those inside stakeholders, but sometimes stakeholders who interact externally. So we're going to hear about it later, civil society groups and those kind of people. The main takeaway I would say, when you're looking at indicators and you're trying to assess where your Parliament is, just ensure that you have the right motivations at hand. And the motivations should be for effective change. And if you have that as your starting point, and everyone that you're engaging with has that, then you should create a successful self-assessment period. And I think, Irina, I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you for pointing out these benefits of self-assessment approach, but also the importance of political will for any successful assessment, self-assessment, or any other in the Parliament. One of our project partners comes from the civil society, Directorio Legislativo Foundation, which has brought to the project a really valuable perspective of civil society, as well as perspective from parliaments in Latin America. Today with us is Juan Krajo, Coordinator of Citizens and Government Institutions at DLF, Directorio Legislativo. Juan, how do you see the significance of indicators from a civil society perspective? and how civil society organizations can utilize the indicators.
Thank you very much, Irena. And also, first of all, I want to congratulate and thank you and the project team for this tremendous work. It's really been a pleasure for us at DL to take part in this initiative. And with regards to your question, I think that these indicators are extremely relevant for civil society because of the enormous transformation potential they have for Parliament. We are talking about a very, very in-depth study which has more than 500 assessment criteria to see how legislative branches are doing in terms of accountability, transparency, inclusiveness, participation. Therefore, as civil society, we have to use this tool for advocacy as it provides us with fundamental evidence on areas for improvement and also to promote demands and support reforms. And also regarding that, I think we have to also be aware of two things. First of all, is we kind of have to be sensible in terms of the application of these indicators with parliaments, because it is a huge universe, as we said, over 500 assessment criteria that requires a lot of work by parliament. So civil society has to be there to identify and to apply the indicators together with them. It's probably better to go little by little. And also by doing this progressively, all actors become familiar with the formats of the indicators, its methodology. And at the same time, this increases trust between parliament and civil society actors. And second, it'd be great to combine these indicators, this amazing tool, with other existing tools out there that have been created to strengthen parliaments and create synergy between these different initiatives and avoid overlapping. In Latin America, we have what we call the Latin American Index for Legislative Transparency, which we have been implementing for over 12 years and in 6 different editions in over 14 countries in the region and with over 30 society organizations in Latin America. And going back to what I said, it's key to detect which aspects of these indicators reinforce the measurement of the Latin American Index, and with that work together with parliaments to promote changes. Because the idea is that all these tools can be used and, complement each other. And I'll stop here. I'll leave my email address if anyone has any questions or would like to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juana. I see a lot of people in audience from civil society, and I believe this can be useful for them. And tomorrow, I believe we will have more participants from Latin America. It's time to wrap up this roundtable. We are running a little bit out of time. I hope that it contributed to better understanding of the indicators and why and how to utilize them. I would like to thank you all team members for your participation today. And thank you first for believing in this initiative and for your enthusiasm and support throughout the project. Please stay with us if you can by 11:30. We are moving to the next agenda item, experiences and impressions from parliaments. From members of parliament, Secretary General and staff from Pakistan, Ghana, Slovenia and Botswana. We will start with showcasing the experience of the Senate of Pakistan in assessing the preliminary indicators which happened in 2022 as a part of testing the indicators. The Senate examined and assessed its capacity and performance against all 25 indicators, which resulted in identifying a number of actions for further strengthening the Senate. I'm pleased to welcome today the Secretary General Qasim Samad Khan, whose key roles were overseeing the assessment exercise as a whole, fostering collaboration and driving positive changes, and Mirshayi Mazar Baluch, Director General of Parliamentary Development Unit, which was actually the one that conducted the assessment and coordinated the participation of staff from all 18 branches of the Senate Secretariat. Qasim, how would you describe the main impact and benefits of the assessment process for the Senate and particularly for its administration?
Thank you very much, Irene. First of all, greetings from the Senate of Pakistan, and a big thanks to the IPU and its project team. When we received these indicators in 2002 to be tested in the Senate of Pakistan, we were very excited. And obviously, to start the initiative, start the process, we had to, as was mentioned here, the political will. So we took into confidence the senators and the chairman of the Senate, and they were very forthcoming and gave us the go-ahead. And then with the help of our PDU unit, headed by Shai Mazari, we worked on this very diligently. And it was something absolutely amazing. I mean, we were looking forward. Basically, what we did was kind of a SWOT analysis. We, as you, Irene, already said, that our 18 departments and wings in the Senate, 25 indicators were given to them to test their strengths and weaknesses and to come up with their suggestions. And we're very happy to say that we came up with 14 action plans, which we think will further strengthen the Senate of Pakistan. And this exercise was basically looking at our own, where we stand today and where we want to go tomorrow, making our Senate more responsive, more transparent, more, responsible. And this was amazing. I mean, we are very pleased of the actions that we have taken so far with our team. And with the help of IPU, obviously, they have guided us. And the results are amazing. I mean, we have identified areas we can work with and which will help us in the future in making us more open. And we also thank our senators and the team, which are these indicators and the 14 different actions that they had identified. That's amazing. And it took about 3 to 4 months of very hard and very dedicated work by our team. So I think the idea of these indicators and these actions, we appreciate that, and we are very happy that Pakistan is one of those parliaments in Asia that have initiated this, and we have been successful in identifying our weaknesses, and we're going to use these indicators to help us become more efficient and more responsive. And I once again, personally, and on behalf of the Senate, thank the IPU and its project team for guiding us and helping us. Thank you.
Thank you, Qasim, for sharing your experience from the Senate and for, we know, very hard work for the assessment of all indicators. I hope that your experience can be inspiring and motivating for other parliaments as well. What were the most important factors for successful assessment process? We already mentioned some of them, but I will ask Mirshai, what would be your recommendations to other parliaments about organizing the assessment? Mirshai, excuse me, but I'm afraid that we are not hearing you perfectly.
Can you hear me now?
It's better. It's better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, congratulations, and I really commend the IPU, the partners, for the work which they have done for the self-assessment exercise, and especially the document. It is the most informative document which I have gone through for any kind of a parliamentary self-assessment exercise. Everything is defined so clearly, because if any parliament want to go through any indicators, they have defined, they have clarified what they need to do. And first of all, everybody would be thinking that any parliament, why they need to go through this self-assessment exercise. Basically, I believe it's a self-reflection of any parliament. It will highlight your strength, your weaknesses. And there are so many things which we do on the daily basis, which we are doing, which we are not aware of it. It kind of tell you the things which might be important, but they have not gone through our eyes. And while going through this self-assessment exercise, we have come to know about so many things which we are very good at, but we never thought, we have never went through, due to which we were not able to tell the others. like the public petition. We are among the first parliament in the South Asia. We have the public petition, which is so beneficial for any public, which they have any kind of a problem. They could just write to us, send an email, and they can be called for the committee hearing, or even we will solve their problem even if they are not able to attend the meeting. The most important thing is the coordination. If anybody want to attempt these indicators, they need to go through a coordinated effort, like the Anthony said, and the earlier people said, it's a collective effort. You need to put through a collective effort to underwent through any any of the indicators. So the coordination, the will of the administration, and the political support. The support from the members, from the senators, from the presiding officer. These are the key for attempting these indicators. And one had to be patient while attempting these indicators, because the most important part is the evidence. The departments or the section, they might have done the initial part. Then the coordinating department, they had to go through it, because we went through it thrice just to check whatever they have sent, it is accurate, it is well in the define what have been told us in the self-assessment exercise. And the best part, it's not a kind of a judgmental exercise. It is something which you can do while even it's an interesting, and it is something which anybody who would be doing it really gonna enjoy it, because it tells you the things which we are doing and which we might not been able to do, and the outcomes, like the Parliamentary Budget Office, because we in the March we have celebrated the 50 years of the Senate of the Pakistan, the existence of the Senate of Pakistan, and the senators, they all were talking about getting the more financial role, and because since it's the upper house and the lower house, it has more role in the monetary monetary legislation. So we came to know that the Parliamentary Budget Office is something which gonna give a role to the Senate of the Pakistan, and it's something which give a parliament more autonomy over the assessing the bills and the monetary role of the government. And then we thought of having some rules regarding the, though we have rules regarding the self-interest, but the lobbying is something which was missing. So these are the things which we have come to know through this self-assessment exercise.
Thank you, Mishai. As I said, I believe that your experience can be helpful to other parliaments which may not necessarily do the assessment against all 25 indicators, but can select one or two or more of their interest. For more information about the assessment experience of the Senate of Pakistan, which was here described as like doing a SWOT analysis of your own parliament, we invite you to see the case study page on the indicators website. And Andy, please, if you can put the link to the chat. We also recommend watching the video of the Senator Nuzhat Sadiq, who planned to join us today, but unfortunately, due to some health issues, she was not able to be here. In the next questions and answers part, we are glad to host Emmanuel Betsra, a member of parliament from Ghana, Ursula Zore Tavčar, Secretary General of the Parliament of Slovenia, and Barbara Di Tapo, Clerk of the National Assembly of Botswana. They will share their views on how could the indicators for democratic parliaments benefit their own parliaments or advocate parliamentary reforms from the perspective of the member of parliament, and as well from the perspective of the Secretary General, which these two perspectives are sometimes a little bit different. Emmanuel Betsra was not able to join us today, but we have his video recording in which he also talked about the Africa Open Parliament Index that was developed partly based on the preliminary indicators for democratic parliaments.
EU has developed some measures or some indicators to be able to measure democratic parliament. And for me, it is one of the best that has happened in the IPU over so many years. And I'm glad we have indicators. Recently, the African Parliamentary Network, alongside all other stakeholders, civil society organization that measures parliamentary effectiveness on openness, has done similar thing in Ghana, and the West African sub-region, and Ghana won as the best open parliament in the West African region, and it's been decided to scale it up throughout the whole of Africa to see which parliament is being open, and therefore whether these indicators will help our parliament, especially Ghana parliament. Yes, indeed, it's one thing that will help parliament to effectively work well. I've seen the indicators, of about 7 indicators with so many sub-indicators. We relating it to the recent event being the African Parliamentary Network assessment that was done. There were 3 indicators that they used, and those 3 indicators are all embedded in these 7 indicators. The first one has to do with the transparency, and Ghana chalked the best in transparency. When it comes to public accountability, we did well, and then citizen engagement. And so I've seen a lot of the same indicators in the IPU indicators as well. And so it is good for us. Ghana will learn, because there are a few things that we need to do right. Even though we did very well in the first assessment, there's a lot more to be done. We need to open, especially when it comes to public accountability.
The parliamentary administration has a very significant role in functioning of every parliament and its reforms, and has a role in the assessment too, as well, as we see from the experience of Pakistan. Question for heads of parliamentary administration: what do you see as the key benefits and possibly challenges as well of implementing this tool for parliamentary operations, particularly in improving the services to MPs and to public? Ursula, Secretary General from the Parliament of Slovenia, the floor is yours. Ursula, are you there?
I believe you're on mute, Ursula.
Can you hear me now? Yeah,
yes,
I'm sorry
perfectly.
about that. Well, I would just like to say, when the whole process was still in the preparatory phase, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to join you in one of the online events. I think that was already a year ago. And regarding the indicators, when I learned about them, I have to say that I was very curious. So I did the assessment by myself. It has taken some time, but on the other hand, it was a very, very good exercise and an excellent tool to test the robustness of the parliaments, its administration, and its working procedures. Being a Secretary General, I found especially useful and interesting the indicators dealing with the administrative capacity and independence, transparent parliament, and inclusive parliament. And regarding the transparent parliament, I have to say that we are looking especially to the parliamentary website section, because we are right in the midst of the process of improving and changing our parliamentary website. So this serves us as an unusual tool to do it. However, I have to stress that target 1 is effective parliaments, and it focuses on parliamentary autonomy, which I think is the precondition for the effective work of the parliament, having in mind the parliamentarians and the administration. And in this scope, I would like to stress the special importance of the budgetary autonomy. which I myself perceive as one of the most important pillars for effective and independent work of the Parliament. So it was very good that you put this as the first target, the first pillar of the indicators. And this is actually, we in the Parliament of Slovenia was in this respect a couple of years in advance, but not that much, because only in 2019, we adopted the law on National Assembly. And the basis of this law was to gain the financial and budgetary autonomy for the Parliament. So, to sum it up, I would like to say that the indicators offer a good base for assessing and evaluating different areas of parliamentary work. And it might be presumptuous to say that we should go through these indicators every year. This might take too much time, and some things do not change that quickly. But it is very important at least to go through them every couple of years. And this way, they will serve as an excellent tool for the parliamentarians and for the administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ursula, especially for mentioning using this tool as for the monitoring process. And indeed, if the Parliament does the assessment once, then next year can be much easier and faster to do it and to monitor the progress. And the same question is for also Barbara Di Tapo, Clerk of the National Assembly of Botswana. What do you see as the key benefits and challenges of implementing indicators for parliamentary operations, particularly in monitoring and improving services to MPs and public?
So, Irena, I believe that Barbara from Botswana is not on the call at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I have received her notification that she joined, but probably she had some problems in it. For now we can, I think, wrap up this this part of the launch event. I think we can say that the last 40 minutes were quite in line with the indicators, effective, maybe not that much in terms of time, but certainly accountable, transparent, responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative too, with speakers from different countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. And tomorrow we expect speakers and audience from some other regions and time zones. At the end, I would like to thank all speakers in this segment from Pakistan, Ghana, Slovenia, and Botswana. And to the audience, thank you for your attention. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who's taken part in those two sessions where they've been sharing some of the insights into how they have contributed to and made use of the indicators for democratic parliaments. We have a bit of time here, and I suggest that we use that to talk a bit further, to go a bit deeper into this subject. I just posted an invitation in the chat to contribute. It's an open invitation to everyone here, because I'm always struck by the depth of knowledge and expertise in the audience and the participants of this type of event. And you've heard from some of the panel. We're also keen to hear from you. So I threw out a couple of questions. One's what you see as potential value, or what you see as challenges to successful use of the indicators. And our colleague from the United Kingdom, the UK Parliament, Liam Lawrence Smith, has been first off the blocks to share some thoughts. Liam, can I invite you to take the floor and to develop those thoughts that you're posting, and to continue the invitation to everyone else to add their thoughts and comments in the chat?
Yes, certainly. I was doing a study in a small Caribbean country last week, and one thing that really struck me there is the difficulty of translating a self-assessment into a program for change when the Parliament needs to ask for more resources and there are many competing budget priorities. So when parliaments don't have complete autonomy, budgetary autonomy, they have to operate within the limits of what's possible. So I think this kind of external reference, having a self-assessment to this kind of standard, is a useful tool in that. I was almost completing my thoughts in writing. There were three things I was thinking of. The first was, I'm talking to some students at university on Friday, and I think it's extremely useful for people studying Parliament from the outside to use the framework, because as they drill down to think about what is evidence for these things, people might have a feeling that the Parliament's effective, but where is there evidence for that? Secondly, we have an internal training program, and I thought the process of asking our kind of bright parliamentary officials of tomorrow to think through all the dimensions and the way they're interrelated in that, is it a septagon? Heptagon, yes, would be very valuable. But the most impact, I think, would be to see if our procedure select committee would be interested in using this as a tool for a kind of self-reflection. We have an election upcoming next year, perhaps as a sort of indication of where the program of work will be after the next election. You know, where are the areas on a frank self-assessment that we should still be doing work on. The most obvious one would be Parliament's capacity to set its own agenda instead of having the agenda written by the government, which applies in most cases in our context. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liam, both for the practical use cases that you see and you can move forward in your own work. And your last comment really picks up on one of the questions that's just been posed here. It's about how can more and more parliaments be involved? And I'd like to ask the panelists who have taken part to, if they have some thoughts on this, what do we have to do so that parliaments start self-analyzing themselves? What could help to move parliaments in this direction? We have among the project partners so much experience of working with parliaments, and I'd like to ask if one of the partners would like to volunteer to take up this question.
I'm happy to speak, Andy.
Lydia, go ahead.
Hi. So I think I touched on it earlier. The point that we want to get across is that what do parliaments have to do to achieve this? The first thing, and we talked about it briefly, is political will. If partners in your parliament are not involved and not on board, it's really hard to get that political will to get it moving. And when I talk about political will, I don't just mean presiding officers and members of parliament. I mean parliamentary staff. Having your clerks and having everybody involved in the process is so key. We found in undertaking benchmark assessments that the most successful ones and the ones that are actually vehicles for the change are the ones that have everybody on board. And so to briefly answer the question, I think the best thing to do is to have everybody engaged in the process before you begin taking the indicators on board. Hope that helps.
Can we compare and contrast that with another panel member?
I think, I mean, I totally agree with what Lydia said. And perhaps from a civil society perspective, of course, these indicators are meant to be used by parliaments and to measured by parliaments. But, and going back to maybe what I mentioned in my remarks, is that of course, from civil society, we need to identify which kind of indicators would be ideal for every parliament, so as not to start doing the whole assessment, which can be overwhelming and in that sense can deter parliaments from undertaking this path. But also, I think in order to gather some sort of political will and to engage with more parliamentary staff as well, is that it's important to have like a coalition of civil society. So it's like, you know, the more the merrier, I would say, or like it's with a kind of consortium of organizations, then it's easier also to reach out to parliament and to kind of advocate and to, yes, convey this message of the importance of knowing and having an assessment in terms of like transparency, participativeness, accountability, yeah, and in those kind of sense, yeah.
Thank you, Juan. Ursula from Slovenia.
Yes, I would just also like to add something in regards to having a political will. It's very important, yes, to have a political will, but you also must have the administration that will look at the assessment and will actually, in most cases, I presume, do the assessment as such. Usually, as far as I know, MPs are not the one going through the materials. So it's important to have either the clerk, the secretaries general, those who actually say, yes, let's go and do this. And also here, a civil society, I agree, can play a vital role, because at least in Slovenia, we get a lot of pressure from civil society to do different kinds of assessments. And in a way, it opens our parliament and also helps to have the parliament as transparent as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Doina from UNDP, please go ahead.
I believe that using the indicators as educational material could also be an interesting option, maybe also for building political will. For example, to introduce the indicators to both newly elected MPs as part of the orientation programs that they attend at the beginning of their mandate, but also to use them to perhaps train the newly hired staff, parliamentary staff. So this could also be an interesting programmatic approach to making use of the indicators. Thank you.
Okay, Victoria, go ahead, and then I'll move on to another question from the chat.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, I think it's definitely a mix of all of those things, but one of the experiences that I had reminded me of how important it is to create a parliamentary calendar of events with the Secretariat. And I would love to see these indicators and this assessment integrated into an annual calendar of parliamentary work in which they identify maybe a select indicators one year and another the next year, and work with parliamentary monitoring organisations and civil society organisations to also support the Secretariat in carrying out the assessment and have that embedded in a parliamentary schedule of work annually.
Let's take this a little further. We have different types of questions coming up in the chat. There's a super practical one from our colleague in Lithuania. So how much time does this take? And I have heard that question a number of times, and my favorite answer is it depends, but that's not a very helpful answer. So let's try and unpack that. I'll go back to the panel to share some thoughts on that, but also picking up on the comment from the in the chat from the colleague from Thailand, who reminds us that in 2008, with the support of a civil society organization, the Parliament carried out a self-assessment exercise. It went through a nice process, but then what impact did the exercise actually have? And so maybe as the panel takes up these these two different aspects of the practicalities, but also how to maximize impact. We've heard some of the reflections around the importance of self-assessment. So maybe if you have other practical suggestions around these points, who would like to kick off?
Andy, I can volunteer for that question.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, you know, it's not such a lengthy process. Once you identify how many indicators you are going to take, it depends upon the number of indicators. And once you have identified the team, the department, trust me, it's going to take few days only. The time which is consuming, it's the testing of the evidence. Otherwise, it's a simple exercise. So it's not such a lengthy one, depending upon the number of indicators you're going to take. Thank you.
Thank you. Other reflections on this point, on the practicality of doing the work? What does that involve? And then maximizing the impact of the assessment.
Yes, I can go. Well, that's a really good question, and maybe the $1 million, among other questions, probably. And it has happened. Perhaps I can also speak from the experience with this Latin American Index for Legislative Transparency that we measure every 2 years in Latin America. Is that we, of course, we also obtain or we get an assessment on how Parliament is doing in different kind of areas, and then we issue some recommendations on how parliaments can improve. And the fact of, or I have to be honest, in many cases, even though we have submitted recommendations and we did have engagements with staffers and with some legislators, then in most cases, it ends up being kind of in the middle of, okay, how is the agenda of Parliament doing? And whether they have kind of time or the budget to implement certain initiatives or reforms. So in that sense, I think you have to be as well sensible in terms of like, okay, and given this context of, I don't know, if there's a huge discussion in parliaments around like the budget or whatever, or other kind of things taking up the legislative agenda. So what can we work on? And in that sense, it's very important to have the kind of the say of perhaps parliamentary staff, because some suggestions or recommendations or courses of action can be done by parliamentary staff, which sometimes have to be with providing more information on, I don't know, the legislature staff, or, you know, how like more kind of traditional parliamentary business, but then other kind of reforms or courses of action that imply perhaps amending regulations or laws or that require this huge political will, then those ones are a bit more difficult and require more time. So maybe I think the ones that do not require that political will are easier to undertake and more likely to happen. But in any case, it's very important not only to build, of course, strong relations with Parliament, but also to be really cohesive among civil society actors to push for those reforms that have come out as relevant in this kind of measurements or in the application of the indicators.
Thank you, Juan. Jonathan from Inter-Paris, you have a wealth of experience in this parliamentary world. Could I ask for your thoughts on this?
Excuse me. Well, I would kind of like to go back to the previous question, which focused particularly on how to implement the indicators. And I very much liked Juan's response from the civil society perspective. And what I see as a great opportunity for the indicators, beyond self-assessment, which is clearly the core purpose and utility of the indicators, as an opportunity really for collaborative and constructive dialogue about parliamentary performance. Too often, parliaments are perceived in as good or bad, you know, in a very much a black and white dyadic kind of way. And what I think is fantastic about the very, very broad range of indicators is that if we can establish a collaborative process involving, obviously involving parliaments, but involving civil society, perhaps involving parliamentary development organizations, in looking not at making some kind of overall judgment about Parliament, but to say, okay, let's look at this specific aspect of parliamentary work, how, and let's look into detail rather than just tarring the institution with a brush, but saying, okay, in this area of, for example, gender equality, Parliament is doing well in this aspect, doing not so well in that aspect. How can we work together? What are the things that would allow us to enhance performance in a constructive way? And to me, as somebody who is in the parliamentary development field rather than working in a parliament specifically, I just see this as an opportunity for dialogue with society, and in a more constructive way than often is the case when we just go by newspaper headlines about something that happened at Parliament. So that's the input I'd like to give.
Thank you, colleagues. We're moving into the middle of an absolutely fascinating discussion, and at the same time we are hitting the end of the time for this particular webinar. What it says to me is that we need to create more spaces to continue this type of exchange. There will be a second session of this presentation of the indicators tomorrow, 4 p.m. Geneva, particularly so participants from the Latin American continent can take part. By all means, feel free to rejoin that discussion, but there will be other opportunities. As I close this session, there are a couple of things that really struck me. One is the sense of parliamentary community. It's really a genuine joy to see the different organizations who are working with parliaments, the different parliaments around the world who are thinking about how to strengthen these institutions, coming together to share their thoughts, but also to think about ways in which we can collectively work towards stronger parliaments, and we genuinely hope that these indicators can be a tool for that purpose. The second thing is picking up on some of the presentation from the Pakistan Senate, which really pointed out that the assessment process led to results. That it led to some very specific recommendations for change, 14 actions, which then of course go through a political process, a prioritization process, but is very clear to the Senate what the next steps should be. And this is really, I think, a large value. And the other thing that I noted from the presentation from Pakistan, as a colleague Mirshai said, was they enjoyed the exercise. It's really kind of interesting to ask yourself these questions, to talk about it with colleagues, and to try to come to some conclusions on the way forward. So these two ideas of community, results, and enjoying the process really stuck with me. Jonathan Murphy earlier on referred to the indicators as being open source, and I fully subscribe to that idea. At the IPU, we come at this as a parliamentary organization. We think about this as self-assessment tools for member parliaments, but everyone comes at this with their own perspectives, their own needs, and the tool is there and is available for each and every one of us to adapt in the way that makes most sense. What I'd like to say in conclusion is that we, the IPU, the project partners, are here to advise, to support, and to help you, the different participants on this call, in spreading the word about these indicators. We would be more than happy to talk with you about process, about selection, about ideas about how to bring this to Parliament and to work with you through the partners, through their extensive networks to support your efforts. I close at this point to thank you to the translators. Thank you so much for your participation today, the panel, the audience in this discussion, and have an excellent rest of the day. Goodbye. Thank you.